What crazy story do you need to tell? Years ago I was hitchhiking north of Richmond, Virginia, when a car with two dudes picked me up. We got to chatting, and it turns out they were headed to their friend's place to shoot guns and asked me if I wanted to join. I asked if his friends would be okay with a random homeless-esque fellow shooting his guns, and he said, "Heck, just pretend to be my cousin from Seattle." So instead of sitting on the highway in 100-degree weather, I spent an afternoon eating hamburgers, shooting guns, and blowing stuff up with bags of tannerite on some random DoD employee's woodland property. I don't remember your name, dude, but you were the man. Thanks for a great memory. Yeah, that's what's so great about just having no plans. You can just be open to whatever happens. When I was learning to fly at a sketchy flight school, I was doing a pre-flight check flight. Close to the end of the program, I was doing the run-up in Cessna when I smelled something. "Do you smell that? Smells like gas," I said. The instructor, a 21-year-old, shrugs. Annoyed, I open the door, and there's a spreading puddle of AV gas under the plane. Crap. The instructor panics. "Stay in the plane, I'll get help," and runs off. As soon as I got the engine off, I noped out of there, and watched the plane dump all its fuel on the runway. They kindly gave me another plane, and instructor. They fixed their plane, and a month later, I read about the same plane crashing, due to fuel issues. One fatality. No significant repercussions for company. So, you know how everyone brings up, oh, we're in the future, why don't we have flying cars yet? I feel like most people aren't really good enough drivers to be on the roads, let enough flying through the air, and just imagine what happens when you run out of gas or something goes wrong on your vehicle when you are a mile in the sky. A little while back, my roommate was contacted by a wealthy man in the area who wanted to pay her to be his live-in pet for an entire month. She thought that this was a cutesy way of saying that it was a sugar daddy and baby arrangement. Turns out what he actually meant was that she would be given room, board, and a very healthy allowance to spend a large portion of her day dressed as a cat, walking on her hands and knees, eating out of a bowl, using a litter box, and yes, sleeping in a little cage at night. Sex wasn't even on the table. He was only interested in having a human cat for a month. She seriously considered the offer for a weekend, and then politely declined. Wow, do you hear that, Faye? Humans are getting paid a fortune just to pretend to be like you, and you're doing it for free. My dad went to a secondary school with John Lennon, and was a couple years older than him. My dad was known for playing the drums and being quite musical, and one day John asked him whether he'd like to be the drummer in a band he's forming. My dad was keen, but my granny said he needed to prioritize studying, and so he didn't join. The band formed and were called the Quarrymen, and I think a guy called Colin was the drummer instead of Dad, who I believe was later replaced by Pete Best and then Ringo as they changed to the Silver Beatles, and then the Beatles. I like to imagine that in an alternate universe my dad said yes, and that was history. I don't even mind that I wouldn't have been born if that had been the outcome. He really deserved to have that lifetime. Yeah, I know that a story like this may seem like you missed out on being part of the Beatles, but I think that a band like that really only worked with all of the right ingredients, so it might not have even become the same thing had it had different members, so yeah, you never know with the butterfly effect. Nothing super amazing, but I'm adopted. I have nothing to do with my biological family, save for a half-brother, who I reconnected with last year. We're friends on Facebook. About a year and a half ago, I spent 6 months as a pizza delivery driver. While there, I met a man, probably in his 50s or so. We got along. He was a driver just for something to do, since he's retired now. I quit the job 6 months in, but a couple months ago I came back, and the guy is still there. A week ago, my brother tags me on Facebook, as well as my coworker. A few days later, I asked my coworker how he knows my brother. After a misunderstanding, my brother has the same name as his father, so when I asked, he thought I was talking about my brother's father. We found out that the coworker is actually my uncle by marriage. Or was. He was married to my biological mom's sister for some 20 years, until their divorce a couple years ago. The guy used to babysit me when I was a baby, and has pictures of my brother and biological mom that he gave me. He's currently looking for baby pictures of me, because I don't have any from before I was adopted. My mom and dad would be super happy if he can find them. Okay, so just everyone you ever meet and run into just happens to be a distant relative? What is this, Star Wars? I'd be careful the next time you date a girl. I don't know how interesting it is, but a few years ago I'd go to college in the morning and leave at midnight because I didn't have a PC and needed to work on homework at school. One time, on the last train ride home, we were coming into the last station where I'd get off. There was this Asian guy acting a bit strange the whole ride. He gets up and stands in the middle of the car, and as the train brakes and comes to the station, he falls flat on his face from a full standing position, lays there until the train stops, stands up, dusts himself off, and walks out of the open doors like nothing happened. I saw this guy doing it 5 other separate times, and since I was used to it at that point, I enjoyed looking out for the uninitiated riders' reactions. Plenty more strictly weird stuff happened on my late-night subway rides home. I really enjoyed the entertainment. Yeah, public transit is one of the very few places where people of all walks of life have to come together to be trapped in one little spot for long periods of time. And you never know what kind of people you might run into there. I was an exchange student in Poland a few years ago. I was freshly 18 and had almost no experience with alcohol. The third week of school, we had a dance, and I decided to attend. It was not at all like the school dances we have in the US. First off, it was held in a club, downtown. A little odd, but okay. Second, it had a bar. I was in the senior class in high school, and we were all 18, so we could drink. I was not ready for that at all. Third, I had just started smoking the week before. My high school had a smoking gazebo, and probably 1/3 of my class smoked. I started smoking to make friends. This turned into the perfect storm of me getting absolutely smashed. After blacking out shortly, I was suddenly outside smoking, and my friends and I were walking to the nearby 24-hour liquor store. I walked in, visibly inebriated, and bought a mid-sized bottle of vodka. The cashier was hesitant, but when she heard that I was American, basically just said, screw it, go ham. Probably another 2 hours and another blackout later, the police arrive. They start yelling at my class president for wandering in the road. For some reason, drunk me decides I should get involved, even though I barely spoke Polish, and am super wasted. I walk up to the cop, and in the worst Polish I've ever spoken, tried to say, "Leave him alone." But what came out was, "Leave," and then a pile of vomit all over his boots. Oh man, this is it, I thought. I'm gonna get arrested and deported. The cop looked at me and said in English, "You an American?" Yes sir, I replied, knowing I was in trouble. The cop looked me up and down, looked at the bottle of vodka in my hand and said, "You drink crap vodka, come with me." I was put in the back of the police car, and he started to drive away. My heart sank. 3 weeks into what was supposed to be the best year of my life, it was already over. But he stopped 2 blocks away at the 24-hour liquor store, brought me inside, and bought me a 100 milliliter bottle of Zubroka vodka. He said, "This is good, and cheap. Welcome to Poland. Now let me take you back to your friends." As we pulled back up to the club, he leaned back and said, "Watch this." He turned on the lights and siren, and 3 or 4 kids ran down the block. He was laughing uncontrollably. He unlocked the door, and as I climbed out, he shouted, "Be safe, friend." 20 minutes later, I blacked out again, and the next thing I remember was waking up on the kitchen floor of the house I was living in, feeling like absolute crap. My host mother had made coffee and said, "Wow, you had a night, huh?" And that was the craziest night I ever had. You know, the story kind of reminds me of like when you go over to your friend's house and their parents are trying to really look cool to you, so they're just like, "Hey, why don't we just give you a bunch of candy and you guys want to have a lot of fun?" It almost seems like this Polish cop was just like, "Oh, you're from America? Let me show you how much cooler we are here." When I was 22, I had an internship for Buffalo Wild Wings marketing department. I was also running a lot at this time. Every time I would go and leave for a run, I would text my girlfriend that I'm leaving for a run just so someone knows where I am. I get a text from her mid-run asking for a special picture when I get back. I agree. Then I get a text from my female boss making sure I sent out some paperwork, which I did. I get home and I don't even want to take this stupid friggin' picture. I just want a shower. But I get butt naked and take a bathroom mirror selfie from the head to the kneecap and send it with a kiss face emoji. An hour later I get a text from my girlfriend that says, "Did you forget my special picture?" Frowny face. And I'm thinking, no, what the heck, I sent that. So I go into my text and, oh no, I sent the nude to my boss. My heart sank straight to hell. I immediately try to do damage control and say it was not meant for her and that I'm so sorry. I even screenshotted the conversation from my girlfriend to show that it was a mistake. No response. I went into the office the next day and was called into HR where I was fired. Yeah, it sucked. I had a great gig going. Makes for a great story though. Yeah, whenever something like that happens, you really just have to hope that the person that is on the other end has a good sense of humor. And unfortunately, this one did not. This happened in either the late 90s or early 2000s. So my granddad got jiggy with another woman when he was on holiday once with a lady from Kiribati. Anyway, it produced a child, my aunt. Now, several years ago, my family decided that we would go and visit her in Kiribati. To get there, we had to fly from Fiji on a tiny 50-seater twin-prop plane with one toilet at the front. Now, being a kid with a lot of food allergies, I had eaten something that didn't quite sit right. Mild case of food poisoning, if you will. So after half an hour into our flight, my stomach gives me that feeling where you know you won't stop what's coming. So I got up and went to the toilet. Halfway up the aisle, all hell broke loose. I farted, which wasn't a fart. It was the beginning of full-blown diarrhea. By the time I got to the toilet and locked the door, my undies were soaked, and it was still flowing. I couldn't stop it. Now, I was a good kid, so I didn't want to block the toilet. So I threw my undies in the rubbish and unloaded into the toilet. However, the amount that came out, plus the amount of paper I had used, ended up blocking the toilet anyway, and it stunk. Really badly. I would have been in there for a good 15 minutes. Meanwhile, the entire plane starts stinking of crap. I finished up and cleaned up the best I could, but the toilet was done for. It was starting to overflow. I just slowly went back to my seat with the entire plane staring at me. I had to tell my dad what I had done, and he spoke to the flight attendants, who had to try to clear the mess of a toilet with the water starting to splash on the floor. It was horrible. We finally got to Kiribati, and the plane had to be grounded while they disinfected and cleaned the whole plane, as it started to sweat as soon as the heat from the outside came in. The plane was delayed for a good while. I only remember this as my dad brought it up the other day in conversation. He thought I put my undies in the toilet which blocked it. I had to assure him it was all toilet paper and crap. This is a very unfortunate story because while everyone automatically will get mad at the kid, it's not like he did anything wrong. You know, there's really just no good way of coming out of that. When I was about 10, my family moved from the city to this small town in northern Australia, with like a few hundred residents. We started going to school, and after a few weeks we made friends with the other kids. They kept telling us about this club in town called the Nature Rangers. The way they described it, it sounded like some off-brand Boy Scouts with camping and hiking and all that. They also said they gathered at their ranger hall on Friday to have movie nights with popcorn and hot dogs. Me and my younger sister begged our parents to let us join, so on Friday night we got dropped off at the hall. So we lined to go to the hall, and all the kids are joking and laughing. They open the doors, and we all start walking in, and the whole mood shifted. All the kids immediately shut up. As I walk in, I look up, and on the walls was all the signs. Sinners must burn, the devil is coming for you, Christ is your only savior. Stuff like that. The one that stood out was this huge mural of Australia engulfed in flames, with only our northern town spared. It was an eye-opener for us city kids. What happened next got weirder. It was something you see in movies about fanticles in the deep south of America. We sang these weird folk songs, listened to fire and brimstone sermons. We had to give our faith to the Lord Jesus. The one song that stuck out years later went, "He's under my feet, he's under my feet, Satan is under my feet." The song was accompanied with a dance we had to learn. Me and my sister were looking at each other like, when is this going to be over? Then after all of that, we were ushered outside. The boys and girls were separated. The girls were to stay at the hall, but the boys were off to go with this creepy-looking old guy, who they called Brother Joseph. He was getting all the boys to get into his white van to take them for a drive. That's when I knew that enough was enough. I snuck out of the line and silently got my sister and said we were going. By this time it was late at night, so we snuck off into the dark. Our home was on the other side of town, so we slowly made our way home, creeping from yard to yard. Every time we saw car lights, we hid in the trees or bushes. When we got about half a kilometer from home, I told my sister to leg it, and we sprinted the whole way home, burst into our house, and proceeded to tell our parents the whole thing. They always say they'd never seen us so scared. It's a story we laugh about now, but at the time it was really dodgy. We lived in that town for another 3 months, and the other kids never mentioned nature rangers to us ever again. You know, I have no interest in living in a town like this, but just the fact that places like this exist just out in the outskirts of the world, I actually do find that pretty interesting. It just shows that the whole world is not as mapped out as we think it is, and there are what seem like horror movies just going on in real life. I used to open letters for a state-run bureau. We had a dedicated unit of people just opening letters all day long by the ton. For some reason, a person not in the right mind started to send letters with human feces in them. Perhaps as a form of retaliation, I don't know. This went on for weeks, if not months. Certain units had to use disposable gloves and face masks in case of number 2 letters. For my inconvenience, I was one who had the honors to open one of this perpetrator's mail. This time it was different. Along with poo, something rolled out of the envelope. Something shiny. With the aid of some hand disinfectant and paper towels, I cleaned this tiny round and golden piece of metal. This poop person sent a gold coin from the 19th century, along with his excrement. The coin is small, around 2 grams, but it appeared to be solid gold. I doubt that the person who lost this item is willing to get it back, since sending human feces to the bureau is considered a crime. The coin itself is not worth that much, but this is by far the most ridiculous story I have to tell from my previous mind-numbing job as a bureaucrat. And this, kids, is how I got myself a gold coin from a letter full of crap. Well, I guess the whole saying, a diamond in the rough, is not entirely accurate, but it's close enough. So I'm from Belgium, and have traveled a lot with my parents when I was younger. When I was still together with my ex-girlfriend, we traveled a lot as well, but neither of us had been to the USA. So we told this to a befriended couple, and a few beers later, we started planning a trip to go on one together. Because another mutual friend was studying in the Philippines for a year, and we might as well go visit him. First, we went to New York and Philly for a few days, then took a plane to LA, rented a car and took a road trip through Cali, Nevada, and Utah. During this road trip, we'd often laugh about some of the dumb stuff we'd heard or seen people do in America. We had a bunch of jokes about people in smaller villages, and all kinds of crazy stuff they might do. We had just been to Sequoia National Park, and we were looking for a place to spend the night and eat, because it was getting late. We found some old farmhouse where we could stay in one of the fixed-up cabins, and asked the old lady who rented it to us where we could go and eat something. Mind you, this little town was called Pinehurst, and had an extremely low population. She pointed us to the Pinehurst Lodge, which was basically the only restaurant/bar/store for miles. Went there, ate an amazing meal, and decided to grab some drinks afterwards and shoot some pool. As we were playing pool, this old giant approaches us, wearing a jeans shirt that said George W. Bush, picture of an eagle, and he had a bushy mustache and looked very tough for his age. And we thought he was going to give us trouble about using the pool table and laughing too hard. He is to this day one of the kindest people I've ever met. He asked if we were having fun and if he could join us. He bought us moonshine, which we obviously thought was hilarious, and we bought him a few beers as well. Had a blast the entire evening. While we were playing and drinking, the phone behind the counter kept ringing, but none of us were paying attention to it. So by 11:30, all of a sudden, a woman comes barging in with a gun in her hand, looks at us and stomps over. I felt myself getting nervous and getting ready to react if I had to. She stops behind our new friend, grabs an empty beer bottle and smashes it on his head. We were all perplexed with what happened. She proceeded to shout insults at the man and started hitting him. He calmly tells her to relax, turns towards us, shook our hands, told us that if we ever came back to be sure to let him know so we could hang out again, and then went outside with the woman as we stood there. Still trying to understand what just happened, the woman at the bar just shouts at us, "That's his wife. He's a bit of a social butterfly, and she had already called 10 times to ask when he'd come home." We thought it was pretty cool and all, so we told her, "Oh, okay, we're just going to leave as well then. It's getting quite late." "Oh no, my dearies, it's best you stay a little while longer. The shouting you hear outside is still them arguing, and I could tell you she's quite pissed at you guys because she blames you that he hadn't come home yet. And I have to say it wouldn't be the first time she shot at someone for keeping him too long at the bar. So best you stay a little bit until they leave." So we stay about 30 more minutes, all the while they keep shouting outside. Then we hear a car start and see a white truck speed off. Within seconds, we see a second truck speed after the first one. This was in the mountains with the very narrow and bendy roads. Both cars just leaving at an insane speed. We hear the bartender say, "She drives our children to school with the bus, you know." This would never happen at home. 100% would go back to Pinewood Lodge in a few years. Oh wow, I really had no idea what to expect with any of these stories, but I'd say they were mostly entertaining. But believe it or not, this is only half of the stories I have from this topic, so we'll have the other half sometime later this week. So I'll see you guys next time.